can try and win championships, and that's what it's all about. When you look from the outside and you watch this team, I know we're going to have a real good, solid hockey team this year.
Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson. And who doesn't love to watch the Avalanche put up 7 goals in a shutout victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning? That was really refreshing to see. Of course, we're a little bit salty because we feel like the Rangers should be in the Stanley Cup Finals, but unfortunately, we lost in Game 6 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Eastern Conference Finals. And now, at least we get to watch the Avalanche put up 7 goals on Vasilevsky and prove that Igor is better. But anyways, today we're not going to be talking about Igor. We're going to be talking about the backup goalies for the New York Rangers, with Alexandar Georgiev likely on his way out. There's been a couple reports that he's not going to get a qualifying offer as a restricted free agent. So what are the Rangers going to do at backup goalie? They're going to need to find somebody, and we've identified 3 veteran goalies that could potentially fill that role this offseason. So before we get into it today, how are you doing, Eric? And what are your thoughts on Alexandar Georgiev potentially leaving the Rangers this offseason?
I think shipping him out is definitely the right option here. He'd be asking for too much money. And, frankly, he's been with us for the last couple seasons. But last season, I would say he was our second most disappointing player on the team, besides Ryan Strome, of course. But definitely doesn't have the stats to, be a quality backup goaltender for us. And I think that trading away his rights to another team like Toronto, who's looking for a goalie, would definitely be the best option. And then look to sign a veteran goaltender who just would be a pretty solid backup for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and there are a few veteran goalies that make sense for the Rangers, all of them on, of course, cheap contracts potentially, because the Rangers don't really have a lot of money to spend, especially after re-signing Sammy Blais. They're down under $12 million in cap space, so extending Alexandar Georgiev is not really realistic. But just to recap his stats for the season, he did play in 33 games in 2021-22 season. He had a 15-10 win-loss record. Save percentage was only 8.9 or 0.898, which is not too good. And the goals on average against was 2.92. So he didn't really have that great of a season, and it will make sense if the Rangers decide they're going to move on from Alexandar Georgiev. And one of the names that Eric and I have identified as a potential fit for the Rangers backup goalie position is Yaroslav Halak. And he's been a goalie in the NHL for an impressive 16 years. He's 37 years old. He spent the 2021 season with the Vancouver Canucks on a 1-year deal worth $3 million. And potentially his next deal, whatever he gets in free agency this offseason, could be $1.5 million, somewhere really cheap, super affordable for the Rangers, and kind of perfect for a backup goalie. He played in 17 games for the Canucks this year, starting 14 of those contests, and he posted a .903 save percentage in 2021 as their backup goalie. So much better than what Georgiev was putting up this past year. And like I said, a contract to acquire him would be super affordable for the Rangers. Throughout his 16-year career, he's had a .916 save percentage and .249 goals against average. And I do think that he would be a perfect candidate to back up Igor Shesterkin in 2022. But Eric, what are your thoughts on Yaroslav, and what do you think that he could provide to the Rangers?
Yeah, I think Halak is a very strong goaltender. He's been proving himself throughout the league for the last 16 years. His stats are, frankly, pretty good. Like you said, better than Georgiev's were this year. And I think he would be a pretty solid fit on our team. Backup goalies playing mostly against teams that aren't as good as the playoff contenders. So I think he would be a pretty good fit for us. The only concern I would have is his age. He is 37 years old. It's pretty old for the NHL. And it's around that point where your stats start to drop off and your career starts to decline a little bit. But so I think it would be a good fit for maybe 1 or 2 more years. I definitely wouldn't sign him for any more than 2 or 3. But if we can get him on a cheap deal, like 1.5 million, like you said, I think that'd be perfect just for a couple years while we are still in cup contention.
Yeah, if I had to project a contract for Yaroslav Halak, it would probably be 1 year, $1.5 million. Of course, he's been in the league forever, as we mentioned, and he used to be a really good, solid starter back in the day. Of course, with the Montreal Canadiens, as I mentioned. In 2010, he had a 53 save playoff performance and a victory for them, which is just utterly insane. And he's had a few really good performances in his career. He's been to the playoffs many times. Again, he's an experienced veteran, and I do feel like that's exactly what the Rangers need behind Igor Shesterkin this season. Just a really experienced guy who can be a leader on and off the ice and kind of just fill in when he needs to. And you can rely on him. Reliable veteran performer, and I think that's exactly what Yaroslav Halak could provide the Rangers with. So,
And
yeah.
and he also used to spend a little bit of time on the Islanders, so it's always a good feeling when we just pick up someone that was on the Islanders and make them one of us.
Yeah,
Except
he
we did
was
that.
with the Islanders, and he was also with Boston as well. He's been around the league, been playing for quite a few teams, but the 1 year deal recently with the Canucks, and now hopefully he can get maybe another 1 year deal potentially with the Rangers for really cheap. As I mentioned, I think it would only be about $1.5 million, so definitely affordable. But Eric, who's the next guy that we have on our list of potential candidates to replace Alexander Georgiev?
So another guy who I think might be a good fit, he's a little younger. I was thinking Eric Comrie, potentially. Um, if you want to discuss him a little bit, or I can just get right into
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, Eric Comrie is a really interesting candidate because he's a player that has kind of struggled to find his footing in the NHL throughout his career. He spent a lot of time on the waiver wire. It's almost been his primary home rather than being with a team. He spent more time almost on the waiver wire. He's bounced around to 3 different teams. He's had like 3 separate stints with the same team, the Winnipeg Jets. And in 2021, he played on a 1 year contract with the Jets for $750,000. So super cheap. I think that's the minimum there. And
Hmm.
he started 16 games and played in a total of 19, but he did record a really impressive .920 save percentage this season. He had a 2.58 goals against average, and he had a .955 save percentage on unblocked shot attempts and a .944 expected save percentage during those same situations. That's a difference of .011 points. The only other goaltender in the league that featured a higher differential was New York's Igor Shesterkin at .012. So in terms of unblocked shot attempts and expected save percentage, there was like 2 players that were the best in the NHL. It was Igor Shesterkin and it was Eric Comrie. And Eric Comrie is a backup who played on a super cheap contract and played well above expectations for that contract with the Winnipeg Jets. So I think that Eric, you're the one that identified this guy, and I think that he's a super solid contender. He is younger and he is coming off of a really solid year as a backup goalie. So potentially he might get a bit more money than expected. He only made $750,000 last year. I'm hoping that the contract this year, if the Rangers were to pursue him, wouldn't be more than 1.5. That is double last year's wage. But there are some teams that might be looking at what he did this past season and say, we might want to make him a starter full time, give him starter money. So, what are your concerns potentially with where the contract could go? And what are your total thoughts on Eric Comrie?
Yeah, so obviously I found this guy. I think Comrie is a phenomenal player. There's a lot of great goaltending out there in the free agency market this year. So there's really like a lot of options that the Rangers have. But I really like Comrie because of the stats that you've just read to me. 920 save percentage. That's starter level. Like you see, like average starting goaltenders throughout the league will have those numbers. And the only concerning thing about that is, though, like you said, he only started in 16 games and played in 19 games. So that's only about a quarter of the season. Who knows what his numbers would have looked like had he played a full 82 games? Well, obviously, no goaltender would play full 82, but you know what I mean, like a full season worth of play. So that's why I think it's kind of like a medium risk, high reward type thing because he hasn't played that many games. So you could definitely sign him for a cheap contract, like 1.5 million, like at max is what I would want to spend on a backup goaltender for the season. Um, but then if you sign him for that cheap and he continues this phenomenal play, it's like the deal of the century. You just got a phenomenal backup goaltender and he's for really cheap and he's playing amazing. Or then you give him that 1.5 million because of these stats and he plays like a full season and it doesn't reflect what he showed this last season and it seems kind of like a waste. So he's definitely like a little bit of a risk, but if he continues to play as well as he did last season, I would say that Comrie would be the perfect choice for us as a backup goaltender.
Yeah, and I completely agree. If I had to rank these guys that we're going to discuss, we haven't gotten into our third candidate, but I would put Eric Comrie at the top. He's the youngest, and his stats last season were super impressive. You compare them to Alexander Georgiev, and it's not even close. Like Eric Comrie was just significantly better. In fact, Eric Comrie had the 6th best save percentage of all NHL goaltenders, even though he played in only 19 games, which was the 64th most out of all goalies in the NHL this past season. So those 2 stats don't really add up. Having the 6th best save percentage and playing the 64th most games in the season. So I think really kind of where the question mark comes in is he played a very small sample size, but he played really well in that sample size. So can you project that he would continue to play well with a larger sample size, with a larger amount of games? That's kind of hard to make that projection. And that's exactly what Eric was talking about when you're saying that there's a little bit of a risk here with signing Eric Comrie. But that's why I think, most teams are probably going to look at him and say, we don't want to see how he plays with that larger sample size on a big contract. Let's give him a small contract. Again, 1.5 million. I think that makes sense. I think it would make most sense for Eric Comrie to sign a 1-year deal, see if he can prove himself back-to-back years on a 1-year deal, and then maybe cash in 2023. So that's probably what he's going to look to do. And I do think playing for the Rangers behind Igor Shesterkin is probably a perfect fit for him. He can prove himself one more time for one more year here on a cheap deal and then cash in next year. And I think that makes sense for both parties, for Eric Comrie and for the New York Rangers. But of course, we'll move along to our third and final candidate, which is Scott Wedgwood. He bounced around the league a few times in the 2021 season. He played 3 games for the New Jersey Devils, 26 games for the Arizona Coyotes, and 8 games for the Dallas Stars. Another veteran goalie. He's going to enter the 2022 season at 30 years old. And in his final stretch of the season with his third team with the Dallas Stars, he played in those 8 games. He was solid. He posted a .915 save percentage down the stretch. And his career save percentage is a respectable .906 with 3.10 goals against average. Again, another solid veteran option who would come on a very affordable contract. Eric, what are your thoughts on Scott Wedgwood as a potential backup goalie for the New York Rangers?
I think he's a great fit. His stats are relatively similar to Yaroslav Halak's, as we discussed earlier, but the biggest difference between him and Halak is that he's 7 years younger. So, if we were looking for a veteran type of backup goaltender opposed to like a younger guy like Comrie, I think Wedgwood would be a good fit. He bounced around the league a little bit. He put up solid numbers for a backup goalie. So if we want someone who can bring veteran experience yet not be too old and put up decently solid numbers, that'll just be like borderline, just like satisfactory. I think Scott Wedgwood is like the optimal fit for that. You can take a low risk like Halak, you can take a high risk like Comrie, or you can just meet right in the middle just for guaranteed solid backup numbers and take Scott Wedgwood. And he'd be pretty cheap too. He wouldn't be more than a million and a half. So I would say like a 2-year deal worth that much would be optimal if we wanted to go the route of Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that he is the cheapest of the 3 options. If you look at his production, it's middle of the road again, as Eric just mentioned. This is the perfect middle ground between the 3 guys that we mentioned. And if you take a look at his last contract, which was a 1-year deal with the New Jersey Devils, it was worth $825,000. His contract previously, it was another 1-year deal worth $700,000. And even the one before that was a 1-year deal worth $700,000 with the Lightning. So he really has been every year making $700,000 to $800,000, and that's probably what he would make in a 1-year deal with the Rangers this season. That's probably what they would sign him to. If the Rangers do go out there and they, listen to this podcast and they select one of these options that we mentioned, and if they decide that Scott Wedgwood is that guy, they're probably going to go out there, offer him a 1-year, $750,000 contract. And we know that we'll get solid backup goalie performance from him. He'll be a solid player. He won't blow your mind, but he's reliable and he's average. And that's pretty much all you really need from your backup goalie is at least solid average play. And that's probably what Scott Wedgwood could provide for the Rangers. So I do like him. I think he is a good fit for the Rangers and a potential really good signing if they go with him. Again, the middle of the road candidate, but Eric, before we wrap this up, I want you to just rank these 3 candidates that we mentioned and kind of take your pick as to who you would like the Rangers to sign.
Realistically speaking, um, I would say that my top choice would be Wedgwood. I really like Comrie. I would put Comrie at 2, but Wedgwood is just the more realistic one. Comrie is like a little bit too much of a risk that I'm not sure the Rangers can afford to take right now. We're on the verge of winning a cup in the next few years, so we don't really want to mess that up too much with a high risk and mess it up. So I would say number 1, Scott Wedgwood, definitely the most realistic, safest play. Then Eric Comrie, and then I would put Halak last because he's a little old. His numbers might decline a little bit over the next couple of years, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of goaltending talent out there on the free agency market right now. So there's a very good chance that whoever the Rangers decide our next backup will not be any of these 3. But whoever we pick, I'm sure it'll be someone with numbers similar to these. So someone in the area of Scott Wedgwood, whether it be him or someone very similar to his play, I think would be the most optimal, most realistic choice for us to make.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Scott Wedgwood is the most realistic choice of these three guys. And of course, as you mentioned, there's a lot of backup goalies potentially out there in free agency. So make sure to leave a comment down below if there's somebody else who's not on our list that you think the Rangers should sign. But if I had to rank these three, I would go with Eric Comrie first. I think that he is the best player on this list. And I really love the idea of letting him play on a 1 year deal and giving him the opportunity to cash in 2023 on a larger contract with another team. Or potentially, if the Rangers trade him mid-season, they could receive some pretty solid compensation depending on how he's playing. So I do think it's a worthwhile investment for Eric Comrie if they were to go ahead and sign him for about 1.5 million. But realistically, the Rangers only have about 12 million in cap space. I think a little bit less than that. And Scott Wedgwood is the cheapest option here. And there's going to be other goalies, similar talent level as Scott Wedgwood, who are probably going to be worth the same amount of money, around 800,000, under 1 million. So I do think that the Rangers ultimately, whichever goalie they sign as their backup, will be on a contract underneath $1 million for the year. And I do think that makes a lot of sense for them. And I agree with you. Yaroslav Halak is my last choice here. I think the age is just an obvious factor. He's 37. Just a bit too old. I think these other two options are younger and better. I think they performed better in the 2021 season, and they make more sense for the Rangers. But let us know down in the comment section below, how do you rank these three candidates? Who is your favorite of them? And why do you think that the Rangers should sign that guy? And again, if you have another option that you want us to take a look at on another episode, put it down in the comment section below. We'll take a look at whatever free agents you guys want us to. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to Fireside Rangers. We post pretty much daily talking about our New York Rangers every single day, following up with all of the content, reacting to games, and basically covering all of the free agency news as well. So subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss a video, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.
Go Rangers.
Oh, and Igor is better. Ha.
Yes, and Ryan Strom sucks.
He shoots. He scores! He scores! Rangers! Rangers!